It is great to be back with this one, the first PMI Live of the autumn season. My name is Lauren Miles and I am Head of On Demand and Digital here at PMI, and I will be facilitating the session today. So with PMI Live, as always, we aim to provide a live and interactive experience. So please do take the opportunity to contribute and participate throughout the session. A massive hello to those of you joining us on the live streams on LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. We'd love for you to also take advantage of those live features. So why not hop on over to pmi.co.uk/webinars and come on in and join us. So the regular attendees of PMI Live, or at least the most observant amongst you, will notice that we have changed webinar platforms. So we're now using the new Microsoft Teams webinar system, and this is our very first public outing with the Teams webinar technology. So please do take some time to check out your control panel at the top. It is different to Zoom and a normal Teams meeting. So you've got your Q&A button for questions that you would like to pose to Rich and Susanna. And then you've also got the chat and reactions function for just any observations or comments you'd like to give us as we go through the session. So
And I'm up for love hearts, I have to say, from the reactions as well. Don't know, is there an angry face? I'm not sure.
So before we get started, Rich, Sue's just invite you to kind of do some introductions of yourselves and maybe a bit about why you're excited about today's performance excellence discussion.
Well, I am excited. Wow,
Yeah.
thank you, Lauren. I'm always excited, as you well know. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be back. Great to be with you. So as Lauren said, my name is Rich Seddon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the managing partners at PMI. My role today, I'll be leading some of the discussions along with Sue's. And positioning particularly insight that I have from a range of our clients that I manage and that I'm engaged with in different sectors, different industries. The first thing I'll be doing is setting the scene. So I'll talk about the contents very shortly. Just allow Suze to introduce herself.
Thanks, Rich. So, hello, everybody. As many of you know me, I'm Susanna Clark. I am normally sitting in Lauren's seat, so not just change of technology, change of role today. So that's very exciting for me. So the reason I'm sitting in this seat today is pretty similar to Rich. I spend a lot of time obviously working with a variety of clients across different sectors. These are the conversations that we're having. And so what we hope to bring to you today is some of that insight from that, but also therefore what their challenges are and how we're working to overcome them, what they're doing, what's working for them. So great to be here with you today, and can't wait for you to facilitate away, Lauren.
Yeah, so I think on that note, I think I speak for everybody when I say let's get into the content. Rich, what are you going to take us through today?
So there's four main sections. First of all, we're going to do setting the scene, as I mentioned. So why this topic? Why now? Why we feel and why we observe from our client base that this is the time for performance and process excellence. Following on from that, we've got some things to think about and some other kind of supporting evidence, I guess. Before we go into two main sections. First is where to start if you've got an improvement program, be it performance excellence, OPEX, continuous improvement, whatever the title is you want to choose. So where to start if you haven't got one already, or maybe you're starting a new one. And then secondly, how to reinvigorate, how to come back to this, how to really build the evidence base, the energy, the momentum, some of the things to consider when might be a program that has failed, maybe one that's stagnated over time. You may be starting a new one based on past initiatives. Who knows? We're really keen to hear from you. And as Lauren says, we've got the QA and the chat. We think our best guess is based on our tests. Let's try and use the QA if you want to pose any questions, and chat for observations. Keep us on our toes. Do take the time to interact. I have to say it's great to see so many familiar virtual faces that are dropping in. So again, if you've got a particular perspective you want to share with us, please do so. That's the whole point of these live events. Also worth us saying, we have a significantly more registrations than we do have attendees at the moment. So if anyone's having technical problems, please do drop a note to support@pmi.co.uk, and the lovely Neil, who's online here with us, will endeavour to help you. That's just a theory. I'm looking at the indicating numbers and there might be something going on. New technology, we ask as ever for your understanding. So let's get on with it then. Let's set the scene. Why this topic? Why now? I'll just share some of my slides with you. There we go. Hopefully that's come up. So let's test this out on you, see how familiar some of these are. So this is based on our evidence base from our clients, as I mentioned. These are some of the key topics that we're observing, that we've collected together. So we've got labour availability in multiple markets, different sectors. We're seeing pressure on labour availability, both skilled and unskilled and semi-skilled, across our client base in multiple industries. That may be resonating with you today. I think everyone's feeling cost pressures and inflation pressures in different ways and different means. Also linked to that is the cost of capital potentially. Some of our clients are seeing the cost of fundraising and actually funding their business changing quite substantially, with interest rates being adjusted around the world by central banks. We've also had much publicised, especially post-pandemic, supply chain disruption of different types. Be that, as the next point says, resource scarcity, be it actual physical movement of goods. We've seen lots of disruption with the flow of goods globally around the world. Could be subcomponentry. Just look for the auto industry for examples of that at the moment. And I know from our clients, certainly it's one of the key themes that keeps cropping up and up and up. And then a particularly European dimension at the moment is lots of concern around energy supply, both in the supply of it and the vulnerability of it and the pricing of it, which links back to the cost pressures and inflation that we're seeing on the other side. Then we've got sustainability. And it's interesting, one of the things we'll be exploring as we go through this is the interlinking nature of sustainability with all of these things. So our proposition is this: with all of these pressures, the common answer is performance excellence can help address all of this. And what we're seeing increasingly is sustainability, and I know Suze will want to come in on this, is sustainability no longer being positioned as an initiative in its own right, but actually being can be positioned as a direct result of all of these things. We'll explore that further on later in our discussions. Suze, do you want to come in on that point now, or do you want to?
Well, I think I couldn't agree more, Rich. And I think the other thing about sustainability is that it's well reported. It is a key differentiator in growth opportunities for those companies who are paying attention to it. So why, given all of the other pressures we've got going on, is this still something that's worth fighting for? And so, absolutely great topic for the moment, and lots of interest around this. Totally agree with the interconnectedness, of course. It's feeding into the more sustainable options available to people now, certainly.
Yeah, and I think when I'm describing as an outcome, I think you can link that to resource consumption, to the way your supply chain operates, to the amount of energy you consume. It all sounds obvious now, but what we've noticed is a psychology shift in corporate programs where going green, as it were, as it has been for a fair amount of time, it's actually seen as an outcome from a sustainability and environmental point that helps to meet some of these. So one of the things we're going to explore this afternoon is how can performance excellence and process excellence help in all of the above. So on that note, let us go to our first poll that we want to ask you about these. So the poll that we're about to launch is going to ask you to rank in order of significance to your organization right now, with 1 being of the greatest significance. So we've taken labour availability, inflation/cost pressures. Inflation's in there twice. It isn't in the poll, so we'll correct that in a moment. Energy concerns, sustainability, and supply chain disruption. So I'll launch that now. It's a drag and drop poll. As I say, it's new technology to us, so it's the first time we've unleashed this onto the unsuspecting public. So let's see what you make of this. Okay, so Yes. So what we've got there is labour availability, cost inflation, energy concerns, sustainability, and supply chain disruption. So let me launch that, and that hopefully will appear on your screens now. So drag and drop the results, number 1 being your highest ranking. That'd be great.
And there is a scroll bar on the right hand side for anybody, so that, because not all of those are displayed, so that's
well
an interesting
noticed.
new feature.
Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that. It doesn't seem to be reporting out that anyone's doing anything right now. So
well,
oh,
I
yes,
guess there are
it is.
two
Yes, it is.
things.
Yes, it is. People are in. This is me getting to grips with the technology. There we go. Okay, so yeah, I can see you responding to that. So we'll give you a few moments for that. Suze, you were going to say?
Well, I was going to say there's lots to think about here, because not only are we testing the technology, but actually you do need to do some good thinking, don't you? Which of these in which order? It takes some time to get it right.
Yeah, definitely. So what we've got, folks, is labour availability being, and inflation and cost pressures being by far and away the top 2 issues, with labour availability slightly edging ahead. Beneath that, we've got supply chain disruption and then energy concerns and sustainability in descending order, all pretty similar. So big leap up with inflation and cost pressures and labour availability. Okay.
Anything about those that surprise you as you narrating, Rich? Or?
Me, yes. Is there anything that surprised me? So not surprising. It's confirmed a theory I had. I was pretty sure those two would be up there. I wasn't sure where supply chain and energy would fit, because obviously energy, especially in the European context, getting a lot of coverage right now. So I don't know. I thought that might appear higher up. So with the presence of labour availability, it certainly is what we're hearing factually. So let's park the media environment of the energy concerns and think about the labour availability. By far and away, we've got clients that are having to suspend parts of their operations due to lack of availability of people to run it, and that's really shining a light on what performance excellence can do for them. And then cost pressures, efficiency and effectiveness we're going to talk about. So I'm relieved to see that one up there.
I think, sorry, just jumping in, because I think
No,
the
go
other
ahead.
thing is, I think this is quite an interesting situation that we're facing at the moment. Many organizations previously might, not all, but might thought cost is an issue. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to reduce my labor costs. Yeah, it's not an uncommon thought. It's not necessarily that everyone does, but it's certainly something people look at. That is not an option. It is not an option for people to consider that at the moment. We are short of great people at the moment. And in that environment, when you're talking to clients, and when I'm talking to clients about that, it isn't, there are the 2 parts of the problem. One is finding the right person, but the second is then upskilling them. And with a client yesterday who was talking about it's a 2-year program to get somebody new into a particular part of their business until they're confident that that person is fully functional, operational, can work independently. 2 years. And so if you can't find the person in the first place, it just keeps pushing out the delay for them to be functioning well. So they have got to look at efficiency and effectiveness in order to survive for the time being, and reducing costs from a labour perspective is absolutely not even on their radar.
Yeah, well, and for 2 reasons. One is wage pressure with inflation, and also, as you mentioned, the availability of people, the competition there is out there in the market. Okay, so let's start exploring this then. So here is our working theory. Faced with the current challenges, which you guys have validated resonate for you, and as I say, to add any narrative you like to the chat or Q&A, here is our working theory for today. Faced with the current challenges, we must improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and adaptability of our organizations. So let's consider those 3 lenses in sequence. He says, elegantly clicking on. There we go. So let's consider them. We express them in this form because they are interrelated and they're interconnected. However, and here's a big check here for the foundations of success that we want to express to you today. In a crisis or a high pressure situation, such as that facing many of our organizations for those issues we've just described, we can sometimes separate these out. And doing so is suboptimal and in circumstances potentially damaging. So why do I say that with so much confidence? So let's get this on the table, what we're talking about. So from an efficiency point of view, it's, in short, the amount of resources required to meet the customer requirements. Okay. Effectiveness is how well your processes meet those customer requirements. And adaptability is how quickly and easily your processes can respond to changes in the environment or the requirements being placed on your business by the customers. So it's not unusual when we're dealing with any of those particular issues. Let's take inflation, cost pressures, to go hammering after efficiency over there without a view of effectiveness or adaptability. So if we exclude those, we may produce a low cost, low quality, less effective process. We also may make that process build in less resilience to our processes, for example, to make them less adaptable to changes that we may see. So the reason we put these up here like this is it is that title there. It's the three lenses to consider. So when you're tackling and thinking about solutions or the driver for your performance excellence program and improvement programs, think, and whichever of those issues we're talking about facing, think about these three lenses. How are they featuring in our response?
The thing that most encourages me, Rich, is that actually, in most of the conversations I'm having with clients at the moment, efficiency and effectiveness are much more hand in hand than they've ever been. Now, whether that's this, they've got fed up with me saying, and don't forget effectiveness, I don't know. But they're definitely far more from new people who we've never spoken to before, they're talking about both. What I don't hear is them talking about adaptability.
Yeah,
I don't know what you
I
find.
agree. Yeah, I agree with that. I'd add another layer on it. I think people merge and confuse efficiency and effectiveness as well.
Possibly, yes. Okay. I'm giving them the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt, perhaps.
Okay, so if we think, so the purpose of this, as I say, is to have those three lenses in your mind when you're thinking about how to structure a program and what you can get out of it. What is it we're trying to accomplish here? A while ago, we ran one of these PMI Live sessions specifically on the topic of productivity. It was with myself, Suze, and Sean Buckland, our colleague. In that session, we presented this. Now, we got a load of response, positive response and feedback on this model. So I thought it was worth including here today. And I know I've dived down a level of detail, but for the reason the feedback we got last time, I thought we'd share this with you today. And again, picture where we are. This is about, we're about to move into where to start with building a performance excellence program. So think about this as background. Here's the rationale in this chain reaction. Improving your system and process performance can give you less rework, fewer mistakes, fewer delays and bottlenecks, better use of talent and equipment and resources. Now, it's not too much of a stretch of an imagination to link those straight back up to those business issues that we just discussed: labor availability, cost pressures, supply chain disruption, energy concerns, sustainability. Tick, 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 and tick on all of those. And then moving further down the chain, improve productivity by releasing latent capacity and talent, labor availability again, retain and gain customers, grow and thrive sustainably, in that order, driving along. This got a lot of response last time, so I'd be really interested if anyone's got any comments or questions or perspectives on that. Do let us know as we progress. So that's a bit of the background, a bit of the base work we wanted to do. Let's think about where to start. So, really familiar image here. I'm sure many of you have seen this. So the purpose of this, the purpose of why we put this image up here, and I always say I'm quite sure that image, the character on the left-hand side, almost certainly would have been a woman. But anyway, let's not get into gender politics today. That's not what this is about. However, it's a fact of life. we're always too busy for improvements. So my advice here is don't waste time looking for the right time for improvement. There is, and there always will be, something getting in the way. You might be too busy. It could be budget season. You could have a new strategy, a new leadership team, change of staff, a new ERP system. You name it, there will always be something. That's not to say you should ignore your current organizational constraints, but it is, and Susan, I'm sure you'll agree with this, it is an observation of ours that we've never, I don't think I've ever found in nearly 20 years at this gig, found a customer that's got spot on right now is the time for us to start launching this performance excellence stuff.
Yes, indeed, and even if they think it is, often shortly afterwards they start saying, "Ah, something's gone wrong," or we're behind on something else, and so on and so forth. I think, I feel very much that all the time we think about improvement as a program, as an initiative, as a something we're going to do for the next 6 months, or something we're going to do to get us out of this crisis. All the time we do that, it's really easy then to find something else getting in the way of it. And there's this whole change that needs to happen and be built up, of it being an absolute necessity. It's as necessary as us having enough money in the bank to pay everybody every month. It's as necessary as for us to have the lights on. It's necessary for us to improve. It's just part of the ongoing work we do in our jobs every day.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. As I was staring at this image earlier on, I was thinking about the context of those challenges of business climate today, and actually, one of the propositions I've got here is that now is don't waste time looking for the right time, but now is as good a time as we're ever likely to get to
Yes.
provide the basis for this stuff. And I think it's the noise that comes around, the everyday life of operating, running our operations, that tends to get in the way. But if you imagine the current context here, and I stared at this image, and I thought, just remove those square wheels altogether. That's potentially the current crisis here. We're dragging this thing along, and we've got to find new ways of operating and reimagining our operations. So although I'm saying don't look for the right time, the foundation, the things we need to address now that are common challenge that you guys have endorsed are the perfect foundation for making this stuff happen. But don't look for space, because it'll never exist. So on that note, let's say we've got the basis that we know we need to improve. We've got some ideas in our mind, some of the priority areas, be it labor availability, supply chain disruption, cost pressures, whichever. This model, and anyone that's ever attended a webinar that I've done, I'd like to get the 3-question model in without fail every time, because it is probably one of the most useful tools there is in the kit bag. And it's also one of the areas, as humans, as problem solvers, we overlook and we march straight to question 3. So let me talk you through this. Being sure about what we're trying to accomplish. Do we have a shared vision of what we're trying to accomplish? Regardless of what the setting is, whether it's labor, energy concerns, productivity, you name it, answering that question before embarking is a key foundation to start any program, any project. What are we trying to accomplish by this? And one of my colleagues, Barry Byrne, ran a webinar a couple of years ago, I think, and he put into his webinar a quote from Alice in Wonderland, which I really like, and I've used it a couple of times. And it goes like this: one day, Alice came to a fork in the road and saw a Cheshire cat in a tree. "Which road do I take?" she asked. "Where do you want to go?" was his response. "I don't know," Alice responded. "Then," said the cat, "it does not matter." And that is precisely the risk we face here. If we don't know where we're going, even if we don't know how to get there, if we don't know the destination, i.e., what are we trying to accomplish, you will run the risk of my number one pet topic is confusing change for improvement. So how do we tackle that? We ask question 2 here: how we know that a change is improvement and not just change itself. In order to do that, it demands theories, it demands predictions. We think if we do this, that will happen. Okay, so there's the measurement system. We're going to talk about measurement systems very shortly. And finally, number 3, moving on then and only then, when you have the answers to questions 1 and 2, to what changes can we make that will result in an improvement. And the orange cycle around it, plan, do, study, act, is the experimentation cycle. It's a scientific model for exploring, for experimenting, for piloting, in order to see the influence, because you've answered questions 1 and 2 of those changes on question 2, if that's making sense, hopefully. Okay, so let's continue this theme. In order to know where you're going, you also need to know where you are today. And we do that by measurements. So I'll just display all these by establishing a measurement system. So I should say one of the ways we do that is through measurements. When we have measures, what the current situation is, we know how the process is performing today. We know what the impact of the changes to the process is, i.e. not all changes are an improvement. It provides us with signals of potential problems. It also allows us to set meaningful targets. Ignore this stuff at your peril, folks, because without measures, it's really difficult to establish priorities and set realistic goals. You just hope and aspiration alone, which just isn't good enough. Assessing whether changes are actually an improvement, it's impossible to do without measurements. In order to identify whether you've got problems, develop this sensitivity to signify what the causes of your problems are, and determine if the gains you've made are being maintained. Sometimes I describe that as the uncomfortable truth when we actually go looking for that stuff. We made an impact once, but has it been sustained over time?
I think that the point in the last but one point on this list, to signify where the causes of our problems are, is, right back to that thing about don't assume anything, don't work on gut feel alone. It's very easy, particularly when we've been working with something for a long time, we have this general sense of what goes on, but without having necessarily the measures and evidence of it. But we just know it so well that we just believe we know. And if you go back to when you were talking earlier about the productivity chain reaction, we think about the amount of rework that goes on, the mistakes that are made, the bottlenecks, etc., that happen. When you start to analyze how the process is performing today, you start then to really attribute where you see those results that you don't like happening. And I can't tell you the number of times where in that situation with the client, they said, oh, goodness me, I didn't realize it was there. I thought it was somewhere else. And so the risk would have been, if we hadn't taken the time to really understood where we are today, which feels slightly time consuming, people feel like they know, so why on earth do we need to do that? But if you hadn't taken that time, you would not have uncovered all of those truths that then actually speed you up, because you then can work much faster because you're working with known facts and data.
Mm, great link, Susanna Clark. Have you seen these slides before? Because my next one is
I didn't
talking.
say I didn't say measure.
Is talking just exactly that topic. So here's the final thing on measures when we're talking about setting out your stall for where to get started, distinguishing between results measures and process measures. Now, what do we mean by those two things? Let's start with results measures. So results measures typically is the kind of thing we run our businesses on. Last month's deliveries on time in full, number of calls answered in the past week within the SLA, those kind of things. Number of customer returns last week, last month, whatever it may be. Pretty much we change the wording there slightly. I'm sure that's one or the other or all of the above will be familiar to you in some way or form. Okay, so distinguish those to process measures, which are the measures of activity whilst that process is still going on within the process itself. So that could be measures within a manufacturing process. It could be within a call center process. Those measures that give you a sense of how it's performing today before its final output has been reached. We confuse those two frequently. And one of the helpful things, I think, when you're go back to the 3-question model, what are we trying to accomplish here? Be really clear, folks, when you're setting up your improvement programs on the distinction between lagging measures and leading measures when you're trying to establish what change will result in an improvement. The lagging measures are by definition, so the results measures, in the past. They're done. It's too late. There is nothing you can do to influence those measures. They have already happened. The process measures, or the leading measures as we sometimes call them, are the things that will indicate how likely you are to be successful in the future. At a highest level, muddling those two things up when you're answering the what changes can we make that result in improvement, that is one of the key areas we see people tripping up.
I think the other thing that's interesting about this is that when we've got people who are working hard on improvements, because we're there saying, come on, you need your process measures, and we're helping them to work those out and define those, they're often actually in the moment of improvement. For the time that improvement's going on, they're very present, they're very useful, and again quite enlightening about actually what's going on. I think the risk, and sometimes what I see, is that once the improvement is over, they maintain measures, but only at result level,
The
and they
improvement
stop
initiative.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the initiative has ended, now through the maintenance of the process, there still needs to be some attention at the right places, at the right times for the process measures, to not lose sight of them. It's not just always then, once the initiative is over, about maintaining results measures.
Yeah, and I often liken when I'm just talking to clients about this concept, I often liken the process measures to fingertip sensitivity, to being able to feel and sense what is going on in the operation live, so that when your index finger, whichever one that may be, detects heat or pain, or both, you've got that level of sensitivity. And I'm deliberately splaying my fingers here because they need to be distinct and clear. They'll be interrelated, i.e. attached to this hand here, but distinct from one another, so you're clear on what it is that needs to change, or where your focus needs to be on improvement, to prevent disappointment and or surprise in the results measure. And how often do we manage our businesses by results measures alone and be surprised and then try and influence things that because we're dissatisfied with the result? We need to shift that right back up the chain, understand where in the processes, how our processes are performing, so that our results measures, the results of our final output, are really boring because we already know the answers.
And obviously not wanting to push this too much, but vital few. If you're measuring everything, reporting everything, you will absolutely sink underneath the number of amounts of data you've got. So work out what those vital few are, both for the improvement but also for the maintenance of the gain. That's what you need.
Indeed, and I think the beware creating a measurement industry as well.
Yes.
Because we can sometimes reassure ourselves that we've got locked down measures on everything. So not only do you do what Sue says, is sink under the weight of it when you've got it, but actually the creation of it diverts precious resource from your improvement activities every day. Okay, so let's move on to the Reinvigorate. So you may have a program that is really successful. You may have a program that's failed in the past. You may have just had something that's gradually declined over time, moved into the background, become BAU, not really a priority, and you want to refresh and reinvigorate. So we've got an experiment. Experiment? It's not an experiment. Well, it is, I suppose. It's the first time we've done it with live people. An exercise is what I meant. Not an experiment. Using the virtual whiteboard within the webinar platform. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully share with you a virtual whiteboard, which is under the same button. There it is. Okay, so hopefully that's starting to appear now. So there's two things we would like you to do when that appears. I'll just give you a few moments. Hopefully that starts appearing. So first question, we've got two statements here. I have experience of an improvement program that has stalled or failed on the peachy coloured post-it sticky note. And on the right, we've got I have experience of a change / improvement program that has succeeded. So the first thing we'd like you to do, our lovely audience, is to let us know your reaction to that. So if you hover over one of those sticky notes with your mouse, you should see a little thumbs up icon. So could you give us a reaction on the thumbs up on those that resonate with you? It could be one or both of those two topics, just trying to get a feel for where people are at. We've got a second build we'd like you to do on this. We'd like to hear your theories as to why those programs have either been successful or not. So we've got a slight lead there on the reactions on the fail and stalled side. So I'm going to remove that panel, and hopefully that has really revealed for you a set of sticky notes. So the second thing we'd like you to do is write a sticky note, one theory per sticky note, please. Double click on a sticky note to enter text. Write your theories as to why under each of those two topics. So why they have been successful or failed, sorry, why they have stalled or failed, why they have been successful over in the blue. So let's start, shall we, Suze, on the left-hand side
Yes.
with why initiatives and programs have failed or stalled. So do you want to take us through some of the topics we've got appearing?
Well, so I'm going to group a couple of these together, and which is I'm seeing change of management focus, change of priorities, other priorities, different priorities, all of those things. I'm going to just put those together. Absolutely not the first time that we've heard that. I think that this comes back down to where do you start, which is to ensure that the area of focus is a sufficient priority for the organization that it's going to stick. Now, I mean, of course, sometimes there's nothing we can do about it, but it's so important. What are we trying to accomplish? Being clear that that is linked to an organizational priority means that you've got a good chance of being able to work on something that's meaningful for the organization and be successful. So that upfront clarity on the priority, I think, is where I would look to focus people.
And that's precisely why I put so much content on measurements in the previous section, because if the measurements are right and the data is presenting its case correctly, it really does help resist change of focus because it becomes self-explanatory. These things happen, but if a program is important, it's responding to the right measures, it should have its own self-sustaining momentum for that reason.
Indeed.
With the kind of the macro influences you've kind of addressed, so change kind of pressures from outside the organization, not necessarily from inside, is there anything that people can do in terms of scope or timings that means you're less vulnerable to those kind of macro influences needing adaptability?
Well, so vulnerable or sensitive would be my question on that one. What we're looking for is sensitivity of performance excellence programs, because if they're not sensitive to a changing environment, then they will inevitably fail, and rightly so, because they're not necessarily working on the right things or in the right environment. So that, I think that would be my first response to that one, Lauren. And I think the second point would be, coming back to those 3 question models, the PDSA element of it. PDSA is about reevaluating where you're at. Are your theories, are your assumptions, is your context still relevant for today to stop you blindly carrying on this route of dogged determination to implement this change? A change that can have been identified as an improvement can, over time, because of changing circumstances and business requirements, be self-fulfilling in its own way.
And I think that sorry, the other kind of big area that I see on the left hand side, and I see the opposite of it on the right hand side, is the lack of engagement with management, the lack of support from management, the lack of management buy-in, leaders who are ineffective, not enough senior understanding or buy-in, and of course, if we were to look at the other side of the blue post-it notes, we'd be saying those that were successful had that. There's we often, when we talk to clients, if you can start anywhere, if it is a choice, then absolutely start at the top, start with the leaders. It is better to start doing something than nothing. It's always better to do something. And if that is an issue for you, then really my advice would be look at that small and incremental improvements that you can make in local processes. Yes,
to prove the case.
To prove the case, to show the change. You don't have to just give up, and you can make the changes that are within your gift to own and manage. And don't take no for an answer. Sit down with your team and say, okay, so can we look at this process? Can we map it out, flowchart it? What worries us about it? Do we all do it the same? Let's think about standardization. All of those things, they can be done, and they don't necessarily need that senior leadership understanding buy-in, but you can improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So other things have caught my eye there about burning platform, good comms, clear scope, engaged leaders, clear plans on time and preparation, being clear on the things we were trying to influence, embracing change, support from leaders, again, leadership commitment. That's excellent. Really, really interesting to see. Any final thoughts from you, Suze, before we move on?
I think that I think that in a way, what I was just saying is, it really stands for me. It is always better to do something, no matter how frustrated you are in an organization. But do not underestimate the value of consistent, regular, incremental changes, small changes to improvement. They add up. They add up hugely. They can make a big difference. And it's fun and it's interesting work. So have a go if you really are stuck with feeling unsupported. Work on the small stuff.
Great. So here's 5 areas to consider in that context of everything we've just said and we've seen, and thank you very much for your contributions. So number 1, understand the value add. So analysing and understanding how and where your processes and activities and people are adding value. So what we're doing here is building the case, building the support, building the platform for reinvigoration. Do assess your agility. How well can your processes anticipate, detect and respond to changes in circumstance, be that demand or customer needs? So to do that, have a look at examples of when things have changed. What performed well? How can we measure that? What data have we got that's available? And number 3 is around identifying, once you've established 1 and 2, how and where you can reduce complexity and waste, identifying, removing any unnecessary complexity in order to help better serve your customers. Remember those business challenges we mentioned early on? Right, we're coming right back to those, building the reason why we're doing this in the first place. So number 4, eliminate or reduce variation, understanding and measuring and sources of variation in your process. Probably one of the most uncomfortable truths in most of our businesses and the thing we overlook most readily. And 5 is identifying opportunities for automation, both digital and mechanical automation. What I'm trying to do here is bring that back to some of the challenges around labor availability, around supply chain, around cost and inflation that you endorsed as current issues for you. The second area, so you've got those five areas to consider. One of the second aspects, I should say, is providing inspiration and food for thought. Now, this isn't a pitch for our content, but we did think that some of this was very useful to show you, because we've had so much evidence from clients recently of using some of the content that's available in our Knowledge Hub to inspire and engage and inform other people in different ways. So Suze, do you just want to talk us through these 3 that are 3 different types of collateral that are available?
Yes, of course. Yes. So hopefully most of you will be familiar with our podcast. If you're not, you can access it through our Knowledge Hub or any podcast app you use. It's called Leading Business Excellence. We interview business leaders and talk to them about the challenges and what they have done and how business excellence has supported them in their personal growth and in the results of their organization. The most recent episode was with Jade Wilcox, who's MD of Wilcox Limousines. They started their business transformation in 2020, just shortly after the UK went into lockdown. And they did lead from the top, and they started with their strategy. But of course, they had been working on that for the last 2 years. So now they're at the stage where they've got people working in huddles, they're measuring processes. And so she talks all about how that's been working for them.
And they recently won Quality Organisation of the Year in the CQI International Quality
They
Awards.
did.
Look at me remembering the title.
Room for Improvement is our short video series. It's practitioners who are talking about what improvement means to them. Whether it's quality, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, they all come from different angles. Andre Matt, really interesting. So he's VP of Operational Excellence at Uniper. And I think what's interesting listening to him, for anyone who's a practitioner who's in a team of improvement practitioners and who's thinking about how do I get people to come to me, Andre talks about that, a lot of that, about the difference between pushing improvement out onto the organization or being pulled by the organization to come to them to make improvements, and how you grow that. So really, really interesting. They're around 10 to 15 minutes, so very consumable. And of course,
sorry, Suze,
go on. I was going to say, well, you're all here today for PMI Live. We have a huge back catalogue, both of all of our original weekly webinars, and then the PMI Lives have been running throughout this year. So not only can you enroll on future episodes, but you can go back and watch any of the recordings. Because it's in our Knowledge Hub, all of this content, it's searchable. So going back to the conversation we're having at the start about some of the challenges, if you want to look up something about efficiency, you can go to the Knowledge Hub, you can search for efficiencies. If you're interested in a webinar about efficiency, you can choose the content as a webinar topic, efficiency. It'll pull up all of those that apply. And we find that a lot of our clients are using these in the round, not necessarily physically, sometimes virtually, but with their teams to watch, to listen, to discuss. What can we learn from that? What could we do differently? And that's the point here, is that that's what these are designed to do, is not help you, just you personally, but also help you as a team.
And I think the interesting use we've seen recently of clients picking particular topics and sharing them with people that are facing particular issues has been really interesting.
Indeed.
So there's a QR code there. It's available, very visible if you just go to pmi.co.uk as well, all available for you to access.
And
I've
Rich,
dropped
just
it in the
to
chat
say,
as
yeah,
well.
exactly. Lawrence put it in the chat. So if anyone, if you access the chat, you can see the SIPOC template Lawrence put in there, and also the link to the Knowledge Hub. Or if you use QR codes, you can just access it through the QR code on the screen now.
And I should say as well, also there is the ability to contact us as well. So if there's any of these topics that you want to chat through, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We, you may have gathered, we love to talk, so do do give us a shout. So finally, in summary here, here's the thing. I hope this has come through loud and clear. The time is now, folks. You've got one of the best platforms. It may not be a desirable platform, but it is one of the best platforms to drive and reinitiate, re-engage, start from scratch an improvement program. However, direction is essential. Be clear on what you're trying to accomplish. Measurement is not optional. How do you know a change is an improvement? Do identify and be honest about the causes of success and failure. We're not just talking about celebration events. Ultimately, this is about learning, and hence my reference here to PDSA. Do keep coming back to it. So on the basis that the time is now, we get this question regularly. What about all these belt things that are out there? Suze, do you want to give us a quick whistle stop through these?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, you can see the graphic on the screen. Again, there's a QR code. So if you want to know more, just scan over that and it'll take you straight to our website. But there are a number of different levels of belts, and this graphic is showing you where people are sitting. And if I go back to my point earlier about the sort of people who can make changes, continuous improvements to their processes. You know, those people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, as it were, lots of them, all those operators, if they understand and they've got a good awareness, they're trained to a white belt level, they'll be invaluable for supporting you on that. Your yellow belts will be excellent at making those small incremental improvements, whether they use a Kaizen methodology or a problem solving methodology. Really excellent. And it's really when you get to green belt that we're then talking about shift change, process redesign, and so on, up to experts who can support and coach and help lead at a more strategic level. So we've got a number of blogs and articles on this, again, in our Knowledge Hub, where you can read more about this. But more than anything, please do get in touch. So
And Lauren's just shared Belt Up as well, which is also in the chat.
Great.
So one of the things we will make sure, folks, is all these links. We don't know if this will all be accessible and shareable in the chat with you afterwards. What we will commit to is making sure this is all on the emails that we send you afterwards. Too, I've just committed you to that, Lauren. Thanks very much. Okay, Lauren, over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. Thanks, Fish and Suze. That was great. I certainly enjoyed it.
That's the main thing.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, just to kind of wrap up, we have our next PMI Live webinar coming up at the end of October, last Friday in October. And that one is focusing on putting yourself in the footsteps of your customer and understanding what it is you are really like to do business with. So you can head over to pmi.co.uk/webinars and register for that one. We have put a really exciting panel of experts together for that discussion. Little bit jealous it won't be me facilitating in October, not going to lie. And a lot of you I can see have already started saving your seat on that session, which is great. We can't wait to see you there. So please do also look out for your Voice of the Customer survey that you'll receive from us shortly. We'd be really grateful for your feedback on today's session, particularly with it being, you know, in Teams webinar for the first time, and any suggestions you've got on topics that you'd like us to cover on future events. And sadly, that brings us to the end of today's PMI Live. So on behalf of PMI, Rich, Susanna and myself, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again on next month's PMI Live. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining us.